for research, because that's the basic idea I'm going to look at today. The reason why I picked it up was precisely to bring in an idea of some element of practicality within research methodology, because RM is a field where a student has to actually, student as well as the supervisor. I mean, it's common to everybody. We have to move into the field, and field could be any number of things. I mean, it could be an archive, it could be a public library, it could be trawling through the internet, trawling through various media sources, whatever. We term that as a field, all right? Now, how are we going to do that? And that's precisely why it's very, very important to understand that RM has to be engaged in a very practical way. That it's extremely important. And most of the research scholars who come in nowadays, there's been a subtle shift in their inquiry of research. In the sense, the kind of research that was done, say, 15 years back, where it was absolutely qualitative, it would be absolutely restricted to the idea of a literary text, right? It would be an explication of a literary text. That kind of an approach is slowly giving way because as I said, with the coming of post-structuralism, there's a greater diffusion of social sciences into our discipline. And this diffusion of social sciences is also bringing in a lot of challenges. And the challenges is precisely the nature of data that we are engaged with, right? So we have scholars today who are not only working on literary texts, yes, but they're looking at literary texts within the larger ambit of culture. Yeah, and when you're working within the larger ambit of culture, you're working with certain sections of the population, you're working with certain cultural habits, right? For example, scholars who would be working on, say, folk tales or retellings, yeah, or they're specifically focusing on certain cultural behavioral traits, yeah. For example, Charanik Sahitya or something like that. The bardic literature of Gujarat, because I mean we are from Gujarat. I think you'll relate a little better to that. Now, if you want to work on that, or if you want to work on the entire notion of oral literatures and the nomadic pastoralist tribes that are there in Rajasthan and Gujarat, if you want to work with tribal literature, and then you are stuck. You're stuck mainly because if you're not trained to look at data, if you're not trained to collect data, and if you're not trained to interpret data in a meaningful way, when I say in a meaningful way, it has to be sustainable. I mean, because it's going to be extremely statistical, yes, but there are modes and methods for that. And how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? That's the larger point. I mean, how would you actually locate what is termed as a population sample? Let me give you an example so that we can function with an example. Let us say there's a research project where a scholar would like to work on translations of certain oral ballads of nomadic pastoralist communities in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Okay, let us say folk songs of a few tribes in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Now, how are we going to go about it? How are we going to go about it? Because for one, the challenges that present themselves is going to be very obvious in the sense, first of all, you will need to first identify what is your basic sample. So if I'm going to talk about nomadic pastoralist tribes, if I'm going to talk about oral literatures, oral writings, then I need to know where is my inquiry getting targeted and what would I include within my larger sample survey. If I'll use a few technical words, sample survey. And those students who are working with ELT, or who are working with language studies would be absolutely familiar with certain technical words like this. And another word that I would use, two words that I would use, one would be universe, the other would be population. So when I say universe, I would mean all items in the field of my inquiry. Right? That would constitute my universe. In the sense, if I'm going to take a project on nomadic pastoralists in Gujarat and Maharashtra, then my universe would be a complete database of those particular tribes who will be the subject of my inquiry. Yes, I would request you all to keep this as a two-way interaction. Yeah. So in case you have any questions or doubts, or you'd like any more clarification, you can, we can at once clear it out. I mean, it's not a one-way kind of a thing. Is that all fine with you all? Everybody?
Yeah. They might have unmuted their mic,
yeah.
so yeah. Okay.
All right. Yeah. So I mean, it's always best when students also interact with you when you're working on this. Yeah. So in that sense, if I term it as a population, then I would term it as a census inquiry. So in the sense, my first idea would be to have a look and create what can be termed as my sample design. That's the first thing I would do. All right. So within the sample design, I would have to decide on what is my population, in the sense my field of inquiry. All right. Now remember this very clearly. Let me qualify this before I continue. When we talk about post-structuralist approaches, when we talk about post-structuralist approaches like deconstruction, like post-colonialism, like Marxism, and so on and so forth, the entire feminism, gender studies, and so on, these are approaches. They cannot be termed as methodologies. Though we often take it on as, in the sense we are using the gender method, gender is an approach. It's not a method. I hope that is clear to everybody. So when we talk about research methods, we are talking about absolutely qualifiable attributes and ideas which go on to populate your data. All right. Now, based on that sample you're selected, based on your population register that you're selected, based on the demographics you're selected, based on the mode and the kind of approach you're going to take, whether it's a questionnaire, whether it's an interview, a number of things, you would have to then apply your approach. So you can apply a post-colonial approach on your sample. Remember, it's an approach. It's not a method. The method will be something different. Am I right? Am I being clear about this?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah? All right. So in that sense, first of all, you would have to decide your sample and create a sample design. Now your sample, so if it is a pure qualitative idea of research, then it would just be limited to a series of texts and an approach, right? But the thing is, today, we are not just looking at a series of texts, or we are just not looking at certain authors. We are locating that author within, and the text within a larger cultural matrix. And that cultural matrix that you will design would require what is termed as a sample design. In the sense, this has to be constructed, the sample design, or what we term as the architecture or the architectural elements of your research. Yes. For example, when you're writing a thesis, you would be doing something what's called a chapterization. That's an architectural sample design. So you know exactly what each chapter would require in terms of not only the data collection, but also the data interpretation and application. Am I clear on this? Yeah?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So first of all, you need to design what is termed as a sample design. And once you have your sample design, then you have the process of data collection that may begin, right? Now, data can be of many types. It can be quantitative, it can be qualitative. So especially within the field of literature, there is still a section of people who would be looking at it in terms of a literature review. So a literature review would be your first step, right, towards your notion of data collection or collecting your sample data. All right, and there are many sample designs that you can use. For example, if I talk about the creation of a sample design, then you have to decide what is the type of your universe first. As I said, universe matlab the actual elements, every element of your inquiry. That's your universe. So first of all, you'll have to decide your type of the universe. You'll have to decide what is your sampling unit, right? In a sense, when I say a sampling unit, is it a state? Is it, let's say, because we are literature students, let us say, is it literature located to a state? Is it a literature that is located to a district? Yeah. Is it a province? Whatever, right? So you need to have your sampling unit very, very clear. For example, if I keeping with that example of nomadic pastoralists I was talking about, say orality and literature among the nomadic pastoralists in Gujarat and Rajasthan. Let's say that's a sample title. Then I would have to locate which province or which district these nomadic pastoralists are located. Number one, yeah. I would have to locate their migratory patterns. I'd have to locate whether they are settled pastoralists or are they still nomadic pastoralists. I'll have to locate their population cluster, their population sizes. I would have to locate their electoral indexes, a number of things. What actually comes into the field of what is termed as anthropology or ethnography. Yeah. But until I do that, I cannot get the variations in the dialects. Now that's why I need to have these clusters, this kind of data. For example, a nomadic pastoralist in Saurashtra and specifically around the Jamnagar area would be speaking a very different dialect from the same nomadic pastoralist who is settled near Ahmedabad, right? So there's going to be a massive cultural, not only is there a cultural shift, but there will also be a linguistic shift that's happening. And you're going to have this effect when you'll begin translating those oral tales, oral poems or whatever, oral stories or whatever. So in that sense, you'll need what is called a sampling unit. You'll have to get your sampling unit absolutely clear. The third thing is, we normally term this as something called a working bibliography. It's loosely termed as a working bibliography in the sense, before you begin your research, you need to have a basic bibliography with you, all right, which you would like to refer to, all right? But along with this bibliography, you would also need what is termed as a source list. Now, a bibliography and a source list, a bibliography would be a small part of your source list. In the sense, you would have to actually populate all the possible records, all the possible sources pertaining to your area from different domains. When I say domains, I'm talking about different disciplines. And once you have populated the entire source list, once you have your sampling unit, then you can decide your size of the sample. All right. For example, let's say there's a language student who would like to work on, let us say, Professor Bharat, any one of your students who's working on language, especially pertaining to educational institutions?
Yes, I think Megha also is working. Megha is there. Komal also is working. Yeah.
All right. All right. So
even Clement is also working on the language.
Yeah. So how did they decide their sample, the size of the sample? For example, somebody wants to work. What are the topics the people are working on?
Yeah,
just
Clement.
So that Clement, I know
you can share. Yeah.
Yeah, Clement's work
Clement
I know.
also visited your institute. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And then Komal and Megha, you also can say something about your topic. So.
May I know your thesis titles, please?
Yes, sir. Komal here.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir. My topic is regarding inquiry in syllabus and pedagogy of BVOC courses, Bachelor of Vocation, in context of communication skill in English.
Wonderful.
So that is
All right.
yes.
Okay. Now let's take this as an example. Let's take. Hi, Clement. How are you? All good.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine.
All
I'm
right.
working on constructing critical sense in academic writing, linguistic and discourse features in student writing in English studies.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes.
All right. We'll get to you.
Sir,
Yeah, please.
Sir, my research topic is impact of finishing school initiative taken by government of Gujarat, in which I just try to focus on functional English skills, particularly in engineering students in Gujarat state.
Exactly. All right. Now these are three beautiful examples of how you're going to work with a lot of quantitative data. All right. Now let us say, Miss Komal, yeah, she was working with syllabus. Am I right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now you would have decided your size of sample.
No, sir. Still, I'm working on it.
Exactly. So, what are the challenges that you're going to face, or what are you facing right now?
Yes, sir. Basically, right now, I'm just want to know the basic elements of syllabus that is in context of communication skills. So nowadays, I just want to focus on theoretical aspect and reading book to know more about syllabus design.
Correct. So, if you're going to design, if you're going to decide your sample, then it has to be all the BVOC colleges. Let me give you an example. You're going to look at all the BVOC colleges, BVOC courses, wherever it's running. Number one, you'll be looking at the kind of people, the number of let's say students, and the kind of students who would be applying for these courses. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
All right. That means you're going to look at this in terms of the number of students. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Number of students and those students who have got their employability and how they are benefited with this communication skill papers in their proficiency in language.
Exactly. So there are a large number of things here. In the sense, one is, first of all, you'll have to locate, as a part of your universe, as a part of your source list, you would have to locate all the institutions where BVOC courses are running. Number one. Yes. Number two, you'll have to discover the total number of students who are opting for these BVOC courses. All right. Yes. Number three, you would have to look at which kinds of BVOC courses are running. Number four, you'd have to look at the industry, educational institutions, their interactions and affiliations. Number five, you would have to analyze the efficacy of the courses in terms of employability. All right.
Yes, sir.
So now you have to decide your sample. In the sense, there might be 20,000 students.
Yes.
Across Gujarat. Now, are you going to look at 20,000, or do you want to make us? Now, you decide your sample. Am I right? Is it going to be 1,000 students? Is it going to be 5,000 students? Is it going to be 10,000? Whatever.
Yes.
Are you all understanding this? Yeah, you'll have to limit your sample size.
Yes.
All right, and the limiting or the delimiting of the sample size will actually depend on the nature of your inquiry or the nature of your universe. Everybody getting this? Clement and Megha also?
Yes. Yes, I'm getting that. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So far, everybody's clear. So in that sense, when you're selecting your sample, you'll have to decide what is termed as your parameters. What I mentioned. You'll have to clearly decide your parameters as to what is your sample size, what is your sample unit, what is your source list, what are your limitations, delimitations, how are you going to approach all this. That would be a part of your, what is termed as your sampling procedure. Are you getting this? So your sampling procedure and your sample design that you create are absolutely important for you to get what is termed as verifiable, quantifiable, and reliable data that comes out of it. The moment there is any ambiguity in your sampling procedure or the nature of your sample, you're going to get a very different idea. You'll get a very different idea, because I mean, at times we have found research students who would have very inappropriate sampling frames. They would have very defective measuring devices, right? In a sense, when I say a measuring device, it could be a questionnaire, it could be an interview, it could be a number of things. What is termed as a measuring device? Yeah. Now, if your questionnaire is not absolutely bang on, when I say bang on, what I'm trying to tell you is you have instituted an inquiry with this hypothesis, with a hypothesis. Remember, are you understanding this? When you begin your research,
Yes,
you are constructing what is termed as a hypothesis. This could be the likely result of my inquiry. That's the larger idea. Correct? Now, whether your hypothesis is correct or incorrect, it largely depends on your nature of sampling and designing your sample architecture, let us say. Are you understanding this? Suppose let's say your questionnaire or your interview or whatever format that you're using as a part of your measuring techniques, if it is not bang on, in the sense it's not supporting your hypothesis, then you're not going to get a result which could either support or which could reject your hypothesis. So it's absolutely, you have to be absolutely clear when you're when you're constructing your questionnaires, when you're constructing your inquiry, even a literary text. If you're inquiring into a literary text, your hypothesis and your inquiry, nature of your inquiry should go together. You can't, for example, you can't say I'm going to do a post-colonial analysis as a hypothesis if your nature of inquiry is not leading you to it. Is that clear? So two things: your sample unit, your sample size, your sampling architecture, the kind of measuring devices that you use, all has to be properly designed. And this has to be done before you begin your inquiry or before you begin your field research. Clear? Now there's a specific problem that comes in with this kind of data work. Even if, for example, let us say I'm going to do a qualitative work on, let us say, reading gender in certain Asian novels, or reading post-colonialism in certain South Asian novels, or looking at gender in South Asian films, let us say. Now, there is a problem here. The problem is, how am I going to be objective enough where, let us say, I'm not too involved in my hypothesis, and I don't, and in the process, I don't create a bias. Because for any researcher, remember, the idea of bias in terms of the reporting of your data is very, very crucial. All right. When I say bias, I would normally talk about, when I say bias, I would say, okay, are you twisting your data to suit your research? Which can very easily happen, let me tell you. It can happen even with a qualitative thesis. For example, I have any number of examples where a particular approach is taken, whether it's a Marxist, post-colonialist, gender, whatever. All right, you take some approach on texts which might not support it. I found some extreme examples of texts being used where the let us say the approach is not functioning at all, and the reason is not the problem with the researcher. There is the problem with it's a problem with the sample design. In the sense, you need to pick up certain texts where a particular approach is possible. That is crucial. In the same way, if you're working with quantitative data, you need to make sure that you're reporting the data in a systematic way. All right? You have to make sure that your data is not corrupted or your data is not being twisted in what can be termed as a systemic bias. You can't have a bias in your system. Am I clear on this so far?
Yes, yeah. I also would suggest Ahuti and Nimesh to share their topics and the text, so you can help them also in which direction they are moving on.
Yeah, this is a more practical mode.
Ahuti or Nimesh, because you are talking about that approaches, so they are working on that part.
Approaches,
So, Nimesh and Ahuti, if you would like to share your topic and the text you are working on. So,
sure, sir. Sir, I am working on post-1991 India, that how India is changing after globalization. And my main focus is narration of nation, that how India is narrated in recent literature. The text like The White Tiger by Arvind Adiga, Narcopolis by Jeet Thayil, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness by Arundhati Roy. These are the texts in which I am working on. So how globalization is impacting Indian society, that is the main focus of my research.
Perfect. So
like Balaji, you can say that how he has to be objective, so that he is not driven towards only one way of looking. That challenge will be there in
that's what I meant. That's the bias I'm talking about. Right?
Yeah.
In the sense, there's always this bias where you're constructed a hypothesis, and you'll be twisting your universe to suit your hypothesis, which can lead to a very factual problem, right? In the sense, now because it's an approach, as I said, it's an approach. Now, what would you would actually have to be very strong at is with your literature review on this. Those who are working on the qualitative data format, all right? You'll have to have a very, very strong literature review. When I say a strong literature review, there's a reason for it, because research is supposed to identify a particular gap that you find through your literature review. Are you understanding this, all of you? When I say a gap, for example, nation studies would be an archive of nearly 1,000 odd critical works. Let me tell you this. It's massive. So you would have to limit yourself. First of all, as I said, you'll have to decide your sample area. You said post-99. Clear? Post-99. Yes. So that means your sample is already limited to your post-liberalization India.
Yes, sir.
Fine. Now, the moment you take a post-liberalization India, that means automatically you're going to exclude anything that happened prior to it. But in terms of continuity, you'll have to keep it on. Your basic inquiry is post-99. Fine. Now, if you're going to look at texts and you're using globalization as a major as an approach, fine. So your literature review on globalization has to be complete, absolutely complete. All right. In the sense, you should have, at least the last 10 years, every major work of globalization has to be through with you. Fine. Because now what is going to happen is what I talked about, a bias. People will use a literature review. People will use a literature review as a part of their thesis architecture. They will say they will include it in the first chapter or the introduction. Fine. Then there will be no connection of the remaining chapters with that literature review. That is the major problem. Are you getting this?
Yes, this is very important point. That so literature review remains quite aloof from what analysis is done. Yeah,
exactly.
That is the problem. Many scholars. Yeah.
No, that is not what it's supposed to be, because your literature review is your sample. Because it's a qualitative thesis, you don't have data like what Megha and Clement and Nimesh are working on. You don't have statistical data with you. So what is your data right now? Your data would be people who have worked on globalization, people who have worked on post-99 India, in political science, in psychoanalysis, in democracy studies, all right, economic studies, everything, all right. It's a massive area. Now you would have to identify at least 10 major interventions, for example, in economic theory and India post-99, democracy theories, democracy issues and stuff post-99 India. You'd have to look at South Asia post-99. You have to locate India within the larger global framework post-99. That means you're talking about easily 100 odd people in different disciplines who have commented on India and globalization post-99. That would be a sample. Fine. Now, where are you going to, as a researcher, where will you locate yourself here? See, this is the problem that is happening with many students. In the sense, we are trying to change that. They think a literature review is something that is just a construction. You put it in your introduction first chapter. Your analysis has nothing to do with it. The rest of your thesis is your song, your invention. No, that's not what it is. What you're supposed to do is, through those 100 odd commentaries on globalization and India, you would have to locate what is termed as a research gap. You have to locate a gap in that research. You can't replicate what they have done. Then what is the point of your research?
Sir, what should be the main focus? My primary text or globalization as a concept?
No problems. The idea is you're working with globalization. You would have your sample of, say, 100 commentators, right? Okay. Yes. Now, you've read all of them, let us say. All right. Once you've read all of them, you have their critical positions. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is your position in relation to them? Number one. What is your position, critical position, in relation to what people have said? Number one. And number two, can you spot a gap in their conceptual thinking? So is it possible for you to evolve? You have 100 people in your sample, 100 critics in your sample, right? As a part of your literature review. Are you capable of generating the 101st paradigm? That is your work. That would be your work.
Yes.
In the sense, research can be, as I said, trying to evolve something new all on your own. Number one, which happens one in a million. All right. Or second is you look at the existing research, which is the correct way to do. You look at the existing research, locate a gap where you feel your intervention can come in. So that is why your literature review or your sample that you decide is going to be very crucial. Otherwise, what happens is very, very clear. It becomes it's absolutely not research. You have a chapter with your literature review and your analysis has nothing to do with it. So where is your intervention? You have to engage. You have to engage with them. So your analysis, if you have 100 commentators on globalization and India as a sample, then you have to engage with them in your analysis. You have to agree with them, disagree with them. You have to bring your point of view out. That would be a conclusion.
Yes. Getting your point.
Are you understanding me, all of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello,
is that
sir?
clear? Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah. Please tell me.
Sir, myself, Ahuti. Sir, Bharat sir just mentioned about sharing my own topic also.
All right.
Sir, I am studying in literary disability studies and
In disability.
yes, disability studies in literature.
Okay. Okay.
And my title is studying exploring embodiment, family relationship in the context of social perspectives. And I have based my chapterization considering text, literary text, which deal with physical disability, and the next chapter dealing with intellectual text, dealing with intellectual disability, and in the third chapter I am studying disability which is not congenital but acquired disability.
Okay.
Now it happens that if I consider these three parameters: physical disability, intellectual, and acquired disability, and the third and my topic embodiment, the text which should have the example of studying embodiment, relationship, and social perspectives. Then I had to make some compromise with the sample design. In that sense, I could not identify that I am studying this in particularly disability in Indian English literature, or say disability in American literature, or as Nimesh is studying post-90 text, or so that could not be possible on my side, because if I considering this design, then I had to make compromise. I selected 2 or 3 texts from Indian English literature which goes with physical disability. Then for acquired disability, I have some text from American literature, and again several texts are from 40 to 50, and several texts are 2000 onwards also. So this is how I collected my text considering 3 types of disability and 3 components that I want to study.
All right. Now let us say, first of all, of course, you have your sample, you have your discourse ready. All right, you have the disability discourse.
Yes, sir.
Now your discourse is not going to be sufficient. You'll have to look at how the state intervention is happening on the discourse. Like what are the national policies on the discourse? What are the state policies on discourse? How are the state policies? Are they being followed or are they not being followed? Right? Now, even if you once you have all that, then you're working on literature, so you're not actually working on the interview method or the survey method, right?
No, sir.
You're not working on that. So,
No, sir.
So you'll have to. What I spoke earlier is going to come into effect for you also. In the sense, you would have to collect the disability discourse across, literally, not just India. You'll have to take it as a global discourse first of all, right? So you would have to learn about state policies towards the disability, towards the differentially abled across nations. Number one, you would have to pick up the UNDP reports.
Yes.
All right. Once you have your UNDP reports, once you have your, there are a lot of NGOs which are working with the disability sector, with the differentially abled, and they also have a lot of white papers on this.
Yes.
So you'll have to collect all their white papers. Fine. So in the sense, you have to understand this very clearly. Fiction is a lie. All right. Fiction is not reality. Please don't take it as a reality.
Yes, sir.
So that's why it's termed as fiction. It cannot be a representation of reality. What fiction can do, or what literature can do, is one moment, please. Yeah, what literature can do is to show you the gaps in that reality. Actually.
Yeah.
So, so the larger idea is, if you want to know, when you already know that that fiction or any creative process is basically just a representation, then to know your reality, you need your sample, proper sample. Your sample is going to be the entire discourse, right from your United Nations, the development UNDP reports on the differential able, right? You need to know the Indian position on this. You need to know the state position on this.
Yes.
All right, and then you need to approach the problem. Otherwise, and then locate a gap in that discourse of yours.
Yes, sir.
You have to locate that gap.
Yeah, yes, yes, sir.
So once you have all your data, this kind of a data in, a lot of your primary data like UNDP reports, statistical reports, all right, it might not enter your thesis. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
What matters is what is an institutional view towards a discourse, number one. Number one. And number two, why is it that there is a gap in the response that's happening? All right, like not all institutions are friendly, differentially abled friendly. Yeah, so that is something you need to focus on. You need to focus and find a gap in that discourse, then you can move ahead.
Of course, yes. And one thing more, sir, as you told that fiction is lie never taken, that one thing very remarkably that I have noticed is generally when I am studying family relationship, especially the bond between a disabled child and mother, generally all the sociological studies highlight that fact that mother is always so caring, and even though there can be some maltreatment within the family, but mother will always be lifelong, she will be serving to the disabled child. As we turn to the literary tasks, for example, two of my, or at least three of my literary tasks, that Salman Rushdie's The Mood's Last Sigh, or say Anita Dey's Sighs a Clear Light of Day, or even Faulkner's Sound and Fury, the mother's depiction, literary depiction, is creating counter narrative or alternative narrative, we can say. And here the mothers are depicted quite careless, aloof, indifferent towards their disabled children. And still, these disabled characters, Baba or even Banji, could not survive without any motherly care or so. Their position was like this. So the literary narratives are creating the sisters or this foster mothers or any female caring character is required basically there, but it's not the biological mothers that the way biological mothers are depicted. They are creating a kind of counter narrative than the studies, sociological studies, are establishing.
So within that counter narrative that you're observing, how is your basic data that you collected, how is it reflecting on the nature of the family and so on? How is it being reflected within the white papers I talked about? All right, where they're looking at family, they're looking at violence, they're looking at disability, the three factors. What is the actual reality that's coming out? Number one. All right. Then once you have your reality in front of you, once you have your sample data in front of you, then you look at the literary works. And then you have to check whether your literary works are in sync, or are they supporting the kind of a data that is coming in. If it is not happening, then why is it not happening? Shouldn't that be the focus for you? Why is it that literature somewhere is not reflecting the reality that you're seeing? Are you getting me?
Yes, sir.
So see whether it's qualitative or quantitative, your research should move from your data findings. All right, that means you have to decide as a part of your sample architecture the kind of parameters or indicators that you're going to look at.
Yes.
Based on those indicators, you will have to collect your data, and then you will have to collate your literary evidence and your factual data evidence and see what is happening. Otherwise, what happens? Otherwise, as I said, what happens is there's just a literary explication of what's happening. It's not leading to good research. That is the problem.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in this sense, if I can just continue, because I don't know how much time I have left. Right. Okay. Frankly, I haven't even started my class, my lecture, Dilip. All right. Okay.
No, but
so
this interaction is very, very important. This
it was absolutely that crucial thing. Yeah. So in that sense, if you're talking about modes of data collection, let's say we have what is very, very relevant for at least our departments, especially in language departments. One is your interview method that you take. Now, what is an interview? What kind of interviews can you have? How would you structure your interview? Because there's something called a structured interview. What does that mean? Now, for example, let me give you an example. A student of mine just submitted, and she was working on the nature of resistance and orality and culture with a few tribals of South Gujarat. Okay, and she was trying to understand this gap that is there between what is seen as a very traditionalist tribal construction and a very modern kind of writing that's emerging from the same communities, which in a way are more assimilationist, and they don't actually reflect the older concerns, the traditional tribal concerns. Now, she conducted a series of interviews across, and they were very focused interviews. When I say focused interviews or structured interviews, what she did is she constructed the interview, she sent it over to the people who are being interviewed. All right. 1 month earlier, prior, she sent the entire interview questions to the person, right? Now that person, what were termed as predetermined questions. Now this is something very predetermined. Normally, when you think of an interview, we normally will carry a dictaphone, we'll meet the person, and then we'll have a set of 10 questions. We'll ask the 10 questions, and the person will reply, all right, on the spot, which does not give you the proper data sample at all. So if you're going to have a structured interview, this would mean you contact that person prior, give him your set, or give him or her your set of questions. These are predetermined samples. These are not impromptu, informal samples. These are absolutely predetermined samples. So the moment you have a predetermined sample of this kind, you're going to have a very standardized technique that's coming through in terms of a response. That means the person has time to think about your question or your series of questions that you want to ask in an interview, and is able to give you a structured response. It could be in a written form, it could be in an oral form, whatever. But the idea is technique here. The idea is you just don't go and take an interview. It needs to be a structured, focused interview. All right? Am I making sense here? No, a number of things will happen with this. The moment you have a structured interview of this kind, not only will you get better information, there would also be a larger depth in the information. All right. Second, because you're giving the person time, all right, a lot of resistance to your question sessions can be eliminated. Normally, what happens is you might ask a troublesome question, mainly because these are the questions we're going to ask in literature are political questions. Remember, political positions, religious positions, caste positions, and so on and so forth. Now, these are politically loaded questions. Now, people might be very uncomfortable to answer back when they are being recorded. All right? You might never get a proper response. So what you do is, if you have a focused interview, you can automatically give that person time to be comfortable with the questions, and that kind of resistance that you are likely to face is eliminated. Am I making sense? Everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Now the problem. Yeah.
May I ask one question?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, I am working on the diaspora studies, Indian diaspora, and
right.
feministic approach and diasporic sensibilities in Indian diaspora. So in one of the thesis, I come across that they use interview method for this feministic approach. They take interview of some women who are right now in the foreign countries and their feelings. So can I include that method in my thesis, or would it be difficult or different from whatever method and approach I take?
For example, it depends on your sample architecture. All right. Now, the architecture of your thesis. How have you designed it? Number one. All right. Second, you need. There's a lot of static on the line. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
All right. You'll have to first design your architecture in a way where your interview sampling can be of some effect. All right. For example, let's say even if you don't keep it in your main chapters and you put your interviews and your interview responses in the appendix, let us say you create an appendix at the end of your thesis and you put it in, let us say. But then how are you going to use it is your question. Number one. First of all, why do you need it is a second question. Is it necessary? See, this is very important. Is it necessary for your hypothesis? Are you getting me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Your hypothesis, does it support this kind of an idea? What are you trying to get to is a question. Because the moment you have an interview format, then you need a sample of say 200 to 500 to 1,000 people. Or you'll never get what is termed as a proper sample size or a sample data. Normally, a sample for us would be 500 to 1,000. All right. It's what's termed as a very, very focused sample. It's not like a census sample where you might have 10,000 people, 20,000 people, 50,000 people, and so on. For example, if I take a thesis like the syllabus being, for example, this lady who was working with bivouac, right? Now her sample is going to be massive. Her sample might move beyond 10,000 students. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
A sample will move beyond 10,000. Now you will have to devise your tools in that sense. Your tools, whether it's a survey method or it's a questionnaire, because your personal interview method in that particular case will not work. So it will have to be a survey method or it will have to be a questionnaire method. Now you will have to devise your questionnaire or your survey in such a way that the bias is eliminated. Number one, it reflects your sample architecture. It reflects your, it supports the hypothesis that you're working on. Number of things. So if you want to use the interview method, just because somebody has used it doesn't make sense. Are you understanding me?
Yes.
Yes.
So first of all, you'll have to decide whether your sample architecture, the architecture of what you want to work on, your universe architecture, is going to support an interview. For example, you're working with 5 diasporic authors, and you bring in an interview component. Now, how is the interview component going to help your analysis? Tell me. How will it help your analysis of the 5 diasporic authors you're selected?
Yes, I mean just the female character.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Let's say you're going to have 5 diasporic authors and say around 10 or 15 literary texts. You're going to analyze gender there. Fine. Now you're talking about having a set of interviews. Fine. Let's say, okay, you make a sample of 100 women, diasporic women, decide to conduct interviews. Survey method, interview method, questionnaire method, whatever methods you want. Now, all that data that is generated of the interviews, how is it going to help you in your analysis of the literary text? What is the point? Are you getting me, guys? Hello. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Also.
Can you hear me, please?
Yeah.
There's static on the line. Yes. Can you hear me? Can I continue speaking?
Yes, please, Balaji. Yeah.
All right, all right. Now, the question is this. Let's say, as I said, you have 5 diasporic authors and the texts, all right? And you're going to have an interview sample or a questionnaire method, whatever. You're creating a sample of, say, 200 diasporic women as part of your data. Fine. Now, how are you going to correlate your literary analysis and this data? Number one. Number two, why do you want to do it? That's a very important question you'll have to ask yourself. What are you trying to prove? What is your hypothesis? Where is your hypothesis taking you? Are you understanding this? Who was the lady who asked me? Somebody asked me this question, no? Forget the name.
Hello. Sorry, sir. There was some network error on my side.
Yeah. Did you understand what I?
Yes, I get the point. So why do I want to do that? That should be the main focus. So
that should be the main focus. Yes.
Okay. So I just got the idea. Still, I'm working with it. I have not studied all the chapters and all. But I wanted to know that this can be done on.
Yeah, it can be done. Of course, it can be done. But then of course, it can be done. But what are you trying? What is your hypothesis?
Okay, so then I'll think on it. Then how to collect this and how to correlate this interview with fictional work.
Exactly. So you'll have to design. You'll have to design your entire sample architecture in that manner.
Okay.
Are you getting this?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, as I said, interview is one mode. Now, a questionnaire is a second mode. Now, what is a questionnaire? Now, a questionnaire is a massive exercise. Let me tell you. This is normally taught to commerce students. All right. Specifically with BBA, BCom students, with their English courses. I think Professor Barar and I, we taught a lot of questionnaires way back, many years back. All right.
Yeah.
Now, the idea is we wanted to teach BCom or commerce students how to write a questionnaire, mainly because it's a very commercial idea. That was the larger understanding that we had of what a questionnaire was. But a questionnaire can be used in a large number of ways, right? For example, I know Clement here has been using questionnaires across. He had distributed a series of questionnaires to our students in CUG for responses. Would Clement like to explain a few things?
Yes, sir.
Like how did you design your questionnaire? What was your sample? What were the faults in the design? What was the nature of the data that was collected? Yeah.
Okay. First of all, the samples of my respondents were students of English, postgraduate students in English studies.
Yeah.
And then I selected universities where I can go visit and administer the questionnaire.
Yes.
So the questionnaire, I designed the questionnaire on the basis of the research questions and the hypothesis I formulated in the introduction of my study.
Yes.
So I had to look at each question. What kind of data do I need in order to answer these research questions?
Correct.
Yes. So
each
research question with the research instrument.
Yes.
So this question requires this instrument. If it is questionnaire, I have to use questionnaire to collect the data so that I can answer these research questions. And if this question requires me to collect assignments, so I have to do that. If this research question requires me to collect, to interview, so I have to do that. What I did in the collection of data.
All right. Now, now there's an interesting point that we can carry forward. In the sense, a questionnaire is based on what is termed as a question sequence. Right? Now, how you sequence your questions is going to decide the nature of the data that is going to come. Are you getting this, everybody?
Yes, sir.
If you have a proper sequence of questions, then you're going to reduce your chances of being misunderstood. Because a questionnaire can be very confusing if it's not a focused questionnaire. If your sequencing is not okay, the kind of questions, the nature of question, that means one question, a response to a question should lead to the next question. Are you getting this, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, Clement, are you understanding what was the nature of your question sequence?
The questionnaire sequence. So I think that the questionnaire sequence is based on the kind of research question you formulated. So if for instance this research question requires me to design a questionnaire with a set of questions, so to respond to answer this research question, so I have to design a set of questions in my questionnaire so that I can answer this research question. So that is the first set of questions, and then I have to look at if this research question requires other set of questions in the questionnaire. So I have to design that to design those questions in the questionnaire so that I can be able to answer these research questions.
Now let us say. We all design. The biggest policy we can make is we design one common questionnaire for all. That's the biggest error you can make. Let me tell you. In the sense, let us say you have a sample and you might have a differential ability across the sample. That means what is termed as a variable across the samples. Then a single proper questionnaire might not give you the desired result. So at times what happens is questionnaires need to be a focused questionnaire, in the sense you might have to do the same sample. I mean, you might have to work with the same sample with 3 or 4 different questionnaires. And then you collect your data. Are you all getting me on this?
Yes.
So let me explain this a bit more for other people. See, what happens is, let us say, you're going to a small college somewhere in Gujarat. Say you have 12 colleges that you visited in Gujarat, and these are colleges in smaller centers. And you're visiting 12 colleges in urbanized areas of Gujarat. All right. Now, it automatically prefigures in a way, mainly because of being more urban. There's going to be a little more exposure with the students in say in colleges in Ahmedabad or Bhavnagar than other smaller places. All right, it's all about exposure. The kind of, though I mean that gap is narrowing very rapidly now. All right. Now, if I'm going to have one single questionnaire for the whole lot, is my data going to be clear? Will my data come out absolutely spot clear? Now, there are two ways I can do it. One is what can be termed when you're constructing your sequence of questions. You will have to construct a few which will correlate or collaborate with the earlier questions, so that the idea of bias is neutralized. Are you understanding me? Can you all hear me, guys?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes.
See,
yeah.
What I clearly mentioned. Let us say I have 15 colleges in rural parts of Gujarat, 15 colleges in urbanized cities of Gujarat. Now, there are going to be problems. There are going to be linguistic problems. There are socioeconomic problems. There are going to be problems in terms of access, facilities, and so on and so forth. Yes, it's going to directly reflect on your sample. Now, if I have one standard questionnaire for everybody, will I get what is termed as a reliable data? No, I might not get it. Definitely, I might not get it, right? That means, what do I need to do? Do I construct, as I said, there are two approaches to do this. One, you construct a sequence of questions in such a way that, let's say you have questions 1 to 10, all right? You're asked a number of focused questions. Now, you want to remove what is termed as a bias. There must be a set of questions, say between 25 and 30, which would collaborate and correlate with 1 to 10. In the sense, you're not repeating the same thing, but you're collaborating or correlating with the earlier set of questions. That is to remove what is termed as an internal bias in the questionnaire. That is one way of doing it. One common set for everybody with checks and balances, where one question will check up on your previous response. Okay, it's like when you're doing when you're transferring funds, they ask you type your account number and type your account number once more. Or when you're changing your password in your email account, they tell you type your PIN number or password, and they'll ask you to retype your password. Why do they do that? They do that to make sure that there are no errors in the basic data that you've entered. So if both the password and the repeat password work together, then your account is clear. So in your questionnaire, if you're going to have a set of questions, make sure you have a few questions which collaborate and support the previous important ones, so that if there is a gap, it's at once evident. ये ऊपर yes बोला है और नीचे no बोला. Then your data is absolutely clear. Second way of doing it is, instead of one big questionnaire, you can do a series of small questionnaires with the same sample. A series of small ones. So which are very focused. You know, for example, a 5-question questionnaire or 10-question questionnaire on a particular aspect. You can, but then it's a little more field work, where you will be conducting and interacting with them a number of times. Everybody clear on this? Okay.
Yes.
I know whatever I spoke so far is something what we term as working with primary data. All right, whether it's a questionnaire, field note, your sample size, sample unit, sample universe would be termed as your primary data. Right? Now we have a second aspect to your tool analysis, what can be termed as your secondary data. or what can be termed as metadata, right? Now, what is secondary data? What do we mean by secondary data? Now, when we understand what we understand as secondary data is, in literature departments, we term it as a literature review only. All right, all your secondary material would be anything written on the primary material. That is your secondary data. That's how we understand it. But when we look at secondary data, we are normally talking about either published or unpublished data, number one. In the sense, it could be, because if somebody is working on policy and literature, as a wider discourse today, then you could have various publications, whether the central government, state government, governmental agencies, international aid agencies, NGOs, the whole lot. That kind of published data, like this lady who's working with disability studies might be using all this, okay? Second is you're going to have international bodies, international subsidiary organizations, as I mentioned, the United Nations, the development organizations, they have their white papers. So that could be used. Third, we're talking about journals. Now this is absolutely crucial, which is not happening too much in our departments. All of you, what is your, in your part of your secondary data, how much is the journal sample size? Can you tell me? Journals का sample size कितना है?
I think Vaidehi, Ahuti, Nimesh, or even Pooja can reply, because we have done literature review. In your assignment, you were asked to give a tabular format. So if you have the tabular format handy, then you can reply very quickly that this many journals you have referred in your literature review.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, in the assignment of our literature review, I have just overviewed more than 5,000 journals and 5,000 articles on the journals, and it was like 10-15 journals and articles from that to prepare this detailed and annotated bibliography.
Wonderful. All right. Now within that journal database, through that journal database, you'll be making your what's termed as a works cited, a working bibliography, and so on. Correct?
Yes.
Yep. Now, how did you now you located, let's say, 500 journals, let us say. All right, you looked at the overview of 500 journals. You might have looked at 20 of them in greater detail. Now, what were the parameters for your analysis? How are you going to fit them in? What did you note out of it? Tell me. No, in that sense.
Sorry, sir, I did not get exactly what should I.
Let us say you surveyed some 500 journals, yeah, out of which you might have located, say, 20 or 30 important articles. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, what did you do with those articles?
Sir, a general summary in 4 or 5 lines of the articles that I have selected, like 50 to 60 articles, general summary in 5-10 lines, and then 5 articles I have selected for detailed summary.
Okay. Now the question that I want to ask is, why did you do it?
To find it's relevant to my topic.
Beg your pardon? Beg your pardon?
Yes, sir. To find it how it is relevant to my topic.
How is it relevant? How is it relevant to your topic? Correct? Correct. All right. Now, what would be your approach now? What would be your approach with respect to the journals that you're using?
Sorry, sir.
Now that you've got your summaries and you've got major summaries of a few articles, What do you plan to do with it?
To locate where my research stands, different from all of this.
Very good. All right. So how are you going to locate that? How your research stands different from the rest? How are you going to locate that?
So, some of the articles I'll find that that have similar points that I have selected, and then my point is different, and some of them are doing against that, and then how my arguments are in favor of
exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, you're on the right path, but what you're doing basically is you're locating a gap within that research. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, Puchapa has replied. I think.
All right. Now, to make sure or to explain what that gap is, first you'll have to introduce your gap, isn't it? You'll have to introduce, in the sense, your entire hypothesis is based on that gap, isn't it?
Yes.
That means you'll have to outline your gap. Are you understanding this? Outline it, matlab, you'll have to explain in your introduction or in your thesis chapter somewhere that what the gap is. Number one. Number two, and you'll have clearly mentioned that you noticed this gap because of your literature review, through your literature review. Are you understanding this? Yes, and then you'll have to decide, you'll have to get your parameters to find out and locate what that gap is. How are you going to fill that gap? What are your parameters? That will be your research. Yes or no? Am I getting too confusing, guys, or are you all understanding me?
No, it is very perfect. Yeah, not at all. It is, in fact, helping in coming out from the confusion. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, one moment. Am I seen now?
Yeah, yes, you are.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, because there's been a problem with my Geo since the morning.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So are you all getting me, guys, as to what it's all about? You need to be very you need to be very careful with your secondary data. Remember, all right? You need to be very careful with your secondary data as to how you're going to go about it. Fine. That means, you know, the entire. If I go very theoretically on this, you'll have to check for your reliability of your data. You'll have to talk about the suitability. You'll have to talk about your adequacy. So many things. That means your literature review and your secondary data is going to be very, very crucial, because your secondary data will either support your primary or it will go against your primary. Remember this. समझन पड़े छे बधाने? Everybody?
Yes.
See, it's not necessary that all your secondary data has to be accurate. Remember, that means you have to look at your primary data and then decide whether the secondary data is sufficient, suitable or not. Are you getting me? All of you? Okay. Okay. Can I proceed ahead? Dilip, I have time now. 5 or 10 minutes.
You 5-10 minutes. You can wind up. Yeah, you can conclude within 5-10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. This was quite brief. I think you should have. All right. Now, what could be the appropriate methods, let us say, for your data collections and so on and so forth? What are the methods of data collection? How would you go about it? What are the factors that decide how you go ahead with your data collection? Tell me. I'll give you a personal example, all right? When Professor Dilip and we were working on our PhDs, we were already working, right? We were serving as full-time lecturers in the beginning of our careers, right? I'm sure Professor Dilip remembers all his early days, and I remember my early days. Now, we had a major problem. Our major problem was the time factor and the availability of funds. Two major problems we had, okay? In the sense, when we were working on our PhDs, there was very less funding available, zero funding actually. In the sense, we all must have spent a huge amount of money on our research. Let me put it this way, personal money, all right? Second was the time factor involved. In the sense, because we were working, we would never get extended leaves, right? So I remember my PhD was finished, it took me 4 years to finish my PhD, in which the first 3 years went into data collection. And the final year, I wrote my thesis in, I think, 2 summer vacations and 1 Diwali vacation. That's when I finished my thesis, all right? Now, the time factor was crucial also because I was working at a number of places for my primary and my secondary data. In the sense, I'd spent 2 summers. That means nearly 5 months in Calcutta and 3 seasons in Delhi, National Archives. One at National Archives, and Calcutta was there with the Asiatic Society and with the National Library and the Serampur Library, right? Lot of I was working with the 19th century material, so it was very available only in specific places. That means I had to select a very clear method for my data collection. Okay, in the sense, I had to understand my time factor, I had to understand my funds, and I had to understand my precision that I needed. And those were days, remember, when it was the kind of an electronic support that is available today, we did not have. All right. Now, I think Professor Dilip will be able to explain this in a better way now to you all, because he's leading as an ICT consultant across. Now, in terms of digital tools available for the collection of data, how are you going to do it? What is the digital support in terms of collection of data? Because now things are much easier in the sense a lot of digitalization has taken place. Now, in the process of digitalization, data collection is becoming easier and easier now. It's only in terms of ethnographic and anthropological research or very, very quantifiable research that you need to actually move into the field and create a sample and work on a sample, right? Today, it's possible to collect your data sitting at home somewhere. Like, what are the tools you guys are using? Tell me. And once you have your data, let us say, how are you categorizing it? Can you tell me that? Like, for example, your department has created a lot of blogs. You've been trained to use and create blogs right from the beginning. You're trained to create an archive, an e-archive right from the beginning. And this was amazing because I saw this happen way back in 2008 and 9 when I first came to your department. It had already begun by then, right? So how are you categorizing it all? Tell me. I mean, for example, are you categorizing them as case studies? Are you categorizing them as what? You must be categorizing it somewhere, your data. Any idea? Like for example, let me give you an example. It'll be easier. Let us say you need papers on post-colonial studies. So what do you Google?
Keywords.
Like what would you Google? Post-colonial what? Papers on post-colonial studies.
Yes, keywords related to what we want to find.
Exactly. So that is a very, very crucial thing. Now, how are you constructing your keywords? Tell me. Now,
based on the main idea.
Based on the
main idea.
Main idea. Okay.
Yes.
Now, does that work? Does that work
mainly
well? Or are you, or do you use a keyword in terms of relevant pages that become available to you? For example, if I type my main idea, let us say, as a keyword, it might not work. It might not work. I might not get relevant material. But if I have a keyword which can generate a lot of generic material, it's easier for me to trawl through, isn't it?
Yes.
Are you getting me what I mean?
Yes, sir.
In the sense, I'm reflecting on the digital format mainly because a lot of your old traditional formats of data collections have literally disappeared now. All right. So we are no longer talking about moving from one place to the other place now. We are no longer talking about traveling to other places to get everything. I mean, your online platforms, right, from Amazon to your Google Scholar, is able to get you a lot of your research. But your point is going to be here is how are you, because it's so easily available, how are you going to categorize it? Fine. Now, what are you going to categorize it? Can you tell me? I'm sure you guys have done your citing methods class. So how do you cite all this? Tell me. How do you categorize it? When I say categorize, I'm basically talking about how do you document a digital site? You must be documenting it somewhere, no?
By bookmarking.
Like what are you bookmarking?
Yes.
Now, bookmarking, frankly, is going to, let us say a page disappears. Well, when is it going to reappear? Right? A page might disappear, right? When is it going to reappear? You don't know. So first of all, as a part of your methods for data collection, you'll have to decide on modes of documentation also. Correct? No?
Yes.
You'll have to make sure, are you using the MLA? Are you using the APA? Are you using the Chicago style? Are you using the Harvard modes of doing it? How are you documenting?
Sir,
example,
yeah, can I say?
Yeah.
When I begin with the research, I think we had a class about coursework in which I think Dilip sir shared one idea which I am practicing it. So I'm whenever I'm going through any article and or a research paper, and suppose it is very relevant, I do download the research paper, but I do read and write something on that in a Word file and cite it on the very place when I'm getting the research paper, rather than just putting it aside and thinking to cite later on. Because in the starting, this created a lot of confusion as well. Because after some time, I didn't know, like there was a lot of data. So I started citing it chapter wise as well.
Yeah, this is precisely where I was coming to, in the sense, depending on your nature of your inquiry, the nature, the research scholar and the kind of inquiry that he's making, you might have to use a relevant mode of documentation. Please remember this. So it's not a standardized MLA for everybody. Fine. For example, students who are working with quantifiable data, it would be wiser if they shift to the APA form of documentation. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Or you might, or either you shift to an APA form of documentation, or you move to the Chicago style. So, I mean, in the sense, your data collection needs to be organized, your sample unit needs to be organized, and then your documentation has to be specific to that kind of work. For example, if I understand, okay, if there is a student who is working on qualitative forms of research, in a sense, is using an approach and text, then I can understand MLA. Fine. MLA would be absolutely suitable for that kind of documentation, for that kind of work. But if I have a student who is working on ethnographic work, who is working on metadata, who is working on primary data, a lot of field work involved, a lot of ratio work happening, a lot of frequency analysis happening, then that student better move to the AP, or better if it's better starts working with a documentation that would suit the quantifiable mode. Am I making sense? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Am I making sense? So hello, can you hear me, please? All of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are you getting me? So right from your, yeah. So I think I'll stop here. So right from the beginning of what I was talking about, how your sample has to be constructed, how your sample universe has to be constructed, right up to your documentation, it's an organic unit. It's an organic unit. It would be, there's a reason why I said quantifiable data move with the APA style and not the MLA. In the sense, the APA style has components within it which are more friendly, which are more friendly with data frequency analysis. In the sense, you'll find it easier to cite it, right? MLA might lack a few options that the APA has. So depending on the nature of your tools that you're using, depending on the nature of the sample you've constructed, depending on the nature of the mode of inquiry that you're doing, questionnaire mode, interview mode, survey mode, or you're doing a qualitative analysis, you use an appropriate documentation tool also. Fine. So it's not, it doesn't mean that just because we are an English department or a literature department or a complet department, whatever it is, we only have the MLA style. No. Depending on the nature of your research and the nature of your hypothesis and the nature of your findings, it would be wise to find a corresponding documentation tool. Am I making sense?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So if there's a lot of data, a lot of quantifiable data, take the APA, take the Chicago, all right? And mention it very clearly, because it's misunderstood that literature students, literature departments, it's only the MLA. No, that's not how it is. That's not how it is. So you can use other modes of doing it. So especially if you're looking, for example, if you look at journal work and the techniques that they use, every journal has its own mode of documentation. No two modes are the same. So by the time you learn one, the other one is over. So remember this, right from your sample, choosing your sample, deciding your sample universe, deciding the type of the type of data collection you want to do, to the analysis of your data collection, right up to your documentation. It would be an organic unity. All right? Yes, Dilip, am I through?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so it was a good practical talking with the scholars and the topics on which they are working. So
yeah,
they also shared, and you also gave them some tips and some ideas that how they can formulate the things. Exactly. One of the major concerns that you talked also was about this coming down to the hypothesis, because that is still the problem, that many students are not able to frame proper hypothesis. And also then working out and doing analysis and justifying the hypothesis is still a problem. So it was good that you talked about those points also there. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And thanks a lot for sparing your time for this